Welcome! In this series of short videos, we will look at topics for the PowerBasic Windows compiler. Today we will continue the use of graphics masks in creating game maps. This is where we left our application at the end of the last video. What we're going to do today are three things. We're going to add two additional masks to allow us to specify the target and the landing zone sites. And thirdly, we're going to expand the dialog to give us more room on the right hand side, where we can actually provide an area for the user to select what he wishes to do. So let's have a look at the code. Since we want to expand the size of the dialog, the first thing we'll look at is the form designer. So under the Tools menu, if you go into PowerBasic Forms, we can show the form as it stands now. Now the form is currently centered on screen, which we can see if we look at the styles, that the DS center is actually ticked. So even though we actually expand the dialog slightly, the dialog itself will still be centered on the screen. This will give us an area in which the user can actually click on to make decisions of what's happening in the game. Now we'll come back to this a bit later, but let's have a look at the two additional masks we wish to use. So we'll save this code and back to the application. Now I've created additional masks which we can use. One for our landing zone and one to specify the target. So let's make use of these. So the first thing we'll want to do is we'll want to set the icons onto the graphics map. So if we look at the event handler of a dialog, the callback function itself, we'll see in here this is where we worked out the pickup point. Now we'll have two additional areas to designate now. We'll need to work out where the landing zone is and where the target zone is. So we'll create two new functions which will be mostly based on the set pickup function. One to set the landing zone and one to set the target zone. Again with two parameters, the first parameter being the dialog handle and the second parameter will be a true or a false. If the value is true, then we wish to determine the exact location of this zone. If the value is false, we merely wish to redraw it where it exists onto the screen. So let's create these two new functions. So if we look at the set pickup function first, what we want to do is very similar to what we've done in this function. So we're just going to clone this entire function and then change the bits we need to. So we're going to call this set target zone. It's taking exactly the same parameters, so we don't have to change those. But in this case, for our target zone, we're looking for a specific terrain type. We're looking for where the terrain equals terrain.buildings. So we'll just change the comment at the top. And all the other variables are going to be exactly the same. The only difference being is when we're doing this search within the global array, we're looking specifically for a target zone where it's a building and it's not the pickup location or the landing zone. So the first thing to do is to test to see if it matches a building. So we'll just amend this terrain grasslands and make it terrain buildings. And in addition, we want to make sure it's not the pickup location or the target zone. So we're testing the pickup location X and Y coordinates to make sure they're not the same as the one we're reading, and also the same for the target zone. Now we haven't created a target zone user-defined type yet, so we'll do that at the end of this. And having created that, we'll change our prefix to target zone, and the same down here as well. So the code is very similar indeed. Now we'll need to change the mask we're actually using to be the name of the file we have for the bitmap. And the same for the actual bitmap itself, so that our mask and our bitmap actually match. Now the fact that these bitmaps are actually smaller is handled by this piece of code here. This piece of code actually opens the file up for binary reading, and it picks up the width and the height of the graphic, so that our code further down will actually not need any other further changes. As we're doing exactly the same, we're copying the bitmap's mask onto the graphic control first, and then the bitmap itself. And then at the end, we're freeing up the memory used in the graphic bitmap commands, and we're redrawing the graphic control completely. So let's set up these user-defined types right at the beginning of the code. Now we defined the pickup location as this pickup type, which is an X and Y, which is exactly the same as the point user-defined type. So we'll just replace this and use the point one. And we're going to create two brand new ones, one for the target zone and one for the landing zone. So that's those three created. So having created the target zone, we now have to do exactly the same for the landing zone. So again, we will copy this, and in this case we'll want here that the landing zone can be any territory except for water. And we also don't want it to be pickup zone either. So we'll just change what we're looking for in here. So in this case it is not equal to water, and it doesn't match the pickup zone. And we'll change our prefix in here to landing zone. And the final change we need to make in here is to change the graphic we're going to be using from the target one to the landing one. Now, having set that up, we'll need to go back into the event handler, into our initialization. So we have done the set pickup, set landing zone, and set target zone in here. We want to do the same for the timer. And once the timer is actually closed off, we can then run these two routines again at the end. Right, a quick compile to make sure we haven't missed anything. Just take that off the end, and we should be able to run that now. Why can't we run that? Then. Right, there we have the graphic showing all three of the masks. The landing zone with the down arrow, the target zone appearing over a built-up area, and the pickup zone. This is ideal. So now we've completed that, we'll want something over here on the right-hand side. Now it's quite possible that the user may not want to see the landing zone after they've landed, so they may wish to turn that icon off. So we'll give the user a mechanism by which they can either turn on or off any of these icons. So we're going to put three checkboxes over here on the control. So let's have a look at the form designer. So in our form designer, we'll want to put a heading and then three checkboxes. So let's move our checkboxes up here. And we'll have another one and a third. So we'll want to space out our checkboxes. Give us a bit of room. We'll want to put a heading at the top. And we'll give it a unique label. And we'll change the system color. Now the other thing I want to do in here is I want to move the checkbox from the left hand side to the right hand side of the text. You can do that quite easily by having a look at the styles. If we tick the left text and OK, we'll see that the checkbox actually moves to the other side. So we're going to do that for all of these. And we're going to change the names of each of these so they make some sense in the code. I'm going to put a graphic beside each of these that matches up to the graphic on the main graphics control so the user knows which is which. And we're going to put some code in the event handler, the callback function, that each time these is clicked on, the graphic will either disappear or reappear on the graphics control. So we'll need an image for each of these, which we'll do in the main part of the code. So we'll just save this as it stands and go back to our code. So we'll see at the beginning of the code there are 3 new constants set up to match the 3 checkboxes on the screen. Now as we want to put icons on the screen, we're going to use the resource icon command to place our graphics into the application. This can be done quite easily by using resource icon, the name we want to refer to the graphic as, and the location of the graphic on your hard disk. So in our graphics subfolder we have a small landing zone.ico icon file. And in our constants list we'll want to add on 3 additional constants for our images. So we'll just create them now. 107, 108 and 109 for the landing zone, the target zone and the pickup zone. So if we nip into our dialog itself where we've specified all the controls, outside of PB forms I'm going to add in the code to make these images appear on the screen. The control add image command, which takes the dialog handle, the unique reference to the object itself, and the name. This is a name held within the resource file and the location on screen. Now also want to tidy up some of the locations of these checkboxes. I think we'll move these over slightly. This will give us a little more room on the screen. And we'll make our dialog just a little bit wider. Right, let's try running that. Right, there we are. We have our 3 checkboxes with the icon beside each of them. And we have our 3 icons appearing on the screen. Now all we have to do to finish this off is to put some code behind the checkboxes so that when the checkbox is unticked, the appropriate graphic will disappear from the screen. So we have to go back into our callback function, the event handler, and put some plumbing code in. So if we look down to the WM command, the forms designer has put 3 case statements in for you. 1 for each checkbox, the landing zone, the pickup zone, and the target zone. So for each of these, we want to pick up the fact that the icon has actually been clicked upon. And we'll be doing much the same thing for each of these. We'll want to redraw the map. So we're going to create a new function which will be used for map redrawing. So we'll call that fun redraw map, and we'll pass a single parameter which is the dialog handle. And we'll put this same call into each of these events. And we'll create this new function at the bottom of our code. Now, as the purpose of this function is to redraw the map, the first thing we'll want to do is to put the terrain back using the global variable we set up, which stores the bitmap of the terrain. The graphics set bits command is used for that, with the single string variable, and this will put all the data back onto the graphics map excluding any of the icons we've put on top. The next thing to work out is which of these tick boxes has the user actually ticked. So we can use the control get check command to pick out the state of each of the checkboxes. So a control get check with the dialog handle, the handle of the checkbox, and we're putting that to a new variable called long state, which we'll declare at the top of the code. Now this is either going to have a 1 or a 0 in the variable. A 1 if it's checked and a 0 if it's not. So we can quite happily test that to see whether it's checked or not. Now since we've redrawn the map without any of the 3 graphics on it, and purely the hex map itself, we'll want to call the same routine we've already got to put the landing zone in place, if the user has that checked. So we can use the fun set landing zone function, which we have already used before, to redraw that control. And we want to do exactly the same thing for the pickup location, and exactly the same thing for the target zone. So whichever of these checkboxes has actually been ticked, we're going to draw that graphic onto the map. So let's try that code now. So the one thing we will need to ensure is that when the dialog is actually shown, that each of these tick boxes is pre-ticked, because all the icons are currently displayed. So let's go back to our event handler, and we'll set that up at the beginning in the initialization section. So in here we'll just paste in a bit of code, using the prefix command to save a bit of typing, to do a control set check on the dialog, on the object, and marking each of them as being 1, as in pre-ticked. So we run the code now and wait for the 3 icons to stop flashing, which they will after 6 seconds. We can turn off the landing zone icon, we can turn off the pickup zone, and we can turn off the target zone. The target zone icon's not disappearing, so let's have a look at the code where we redraw the graphics map. We are setting each of these on screen, but the one thing we're missing at the bottom of the code is a graphics redraw command. This is a command that forces the application to take the graphic control and redraw it on screen. So let's try that now. So we have our 3 icons flashing. Once they stop flashing, we will untick each of these in turn, and each of the icons should now disappear and reappear when the tick box is actually ticked. So what we've done today is we've added 2 additional masks for the graphics to designate the target zone and the landing zone, and we've given the user 3 tick boxes to control which of these actually gets displayed. What we'll do in our next video is we'll do smaller sprites for the military units themselves. But that's it for today. Thank you for watching.